In this video, we explore the figure of Lucifer and his kingdom as portrayed in the works of Christopher Marlowe, John Milton, and Lord Byron. The discussion is inspired by an essay I recently read by Maxwell S. Boas, which examines these particular texts. Given the vast number of literary depictions of the devil and hell, what immediately intrigued me was why the author chose these works in particular. After reflecting on this, I came to the conclusion that these three texts stand apart because they are, in a sense, the most ungodly. By that, I mean they are unusually sympathetic to the figure of the devil. This is especially clear when we compare Marlowe's treatment of the Faust legend with Goethe's. Goethe, as a Christian, approaches the story with a clear theological bias toward the ultimate defeat of evil and the triumph of the good. Marlowe, by contrast, was an atheist, and his portrayal of the devil, though still negative, is less concerned with moral resolution and more focused on presenting the devil's nature itself. A similar atmosphere runs through Milton's Paradise Lost and Byron's Cain, where Lucifer is depicted with a depth, power, and presence that give the works a distinctly dark and rebellious tone. For this reason, I believe Boas selected these texts deliberately. Together, they allow for a fuller exploration of Lucifer's character and the nature of his kingdom, as it appears in some of the most provocative literary treatments of evil. Although the precise origins of early humankind remain speculative, it appears evident that the same powerful impulse which compels human beings to form religious beliefs also drives them to seek explanations for natural events, such as sudden storms, overflowing rivers, trees struck by lightning, and the outbreaks of disease and pestilence. In the earliest stages, people often failed to distinguish between benevolent and malevolent forces, attributing both blessings and disasters to the same divine being. The early Hebrews, whose thoughts are preserved in written form and no longer rest solely in conjecture, were not unique in this regard. Their deity, Jehovah or Yahweh, who hardened Pharaoh's heart, unleashed plagues, or deceived prophets only to punish them afterward, was seen as sufficiently jealous, wrathful, and vengeful to account for the frequent and terrible afflictions of famine, defeat, and calamity that struck their people. For generations, the idea that a fundamentally good deity could also be the source of suffering and destruction seemed to satisfy the Hebrew understanding of divine justice. Over time, references in ancient texts to evil forces or demons gradually began to merge into the figure of a single, wholly malevolent being. This transformation became more defined during and after the period of exile, when contact with foreign cultures made it crucial to defend the righteousness of Jehovah in the face of suffering and persecution. To preserve the notion of divine purity, intermediary angelic beings were introduced, and the responsibility for all evil was transferred to an opposing force, eventually personified as Satan or the devil, regarded as the adversary of both God and humanity. The term Satan, deriving from the Semitic root stn, originally carried no implication of a specific individual or enemy of God. It simply referred to an adversary or one who lies in wait. Some have suggested that the subtle menace implied by this root may have contributed to its later adoption as a name for unseen malevolent powers. However, in earlier usage, it signified no distinct personality. For example, in one ancient text, an angel of the Lord is said to have stood in the path as a Satan, meaning an opposing force. Similarly, the Philistines feared taking David into battle, lest he become a Satan, an internal betrayer or hidden enemy. David himself referred to those who wished to execute Shimei as Satans. The use of the term Satan as simply an adversary, rather than as a symbol of evil, is evident in a remark attributed to Solomon, where it is said that neither Satan nor evil is present. However, it is also in relation to Solomon that early elements of what would later become the mythology surrounding Satan begin to appear. The word is used twice in connection with Solomon's downfall, and through this association it likely advanced toward becoming a more defined figure, a prominent national adversary, though still without any suggestion of a being who dared to oppose Jehovah's will directly. The first clear instance of Satan being depicted as a personal embodiment of evil appears in a passage describing how Satan stood against Israel and provoked David to take a census of the people. A similar portrayal of Satan's individualized nature can be found in a vision where Joshua, the high priest, stands before the angel of the Lord, while Satan stands at his right side to oppose him. This idea of Satan as a distinct figure evidently emerged before the concept of him as the embodiment of absolute evil. One passage even refers to him as one of the sons of God, fulfilling a particular role given by the divine. He appears among the heavenly assembly that presents itself before the Lord. According to one interpretation, Satan in this context is not yet portrayed as a demonic figure. He appears as a serious and influential presence, performing the role of an accuser, much like a public prosecutor. He is described as moving throughout the earth, carrying out his responsibilities. In the case of Job, he becomes the instigator of a test, an experiment on human faith, one that is undertaken with Jehovah's approval. However, while Jehovah wishes to affirm Job's righteousness, Satan casts doubt on Job's sincerity and aims to break his devotion. Here, the defining traits of Satan begin to emerge, aligning with the meaning of his name and echoing through later writings. Although the harm inflicted on Job occurs with divine permission, it is Satan who proposes it of his own accord. In this moment, Satan's independence is fully realized. Having influenced God against man, it becomes only a matter of time before he turns man against God, transforming not only into an accuser, but into a tempter determined to destroy faith and virtue. Writers of the New Testament inherited the concept of Satan as it had been shaped by earlier tradition and, through generations of interpretation and reflection, were able to present a more detailed account of his development. Once they had accepted Satan's former status as a son of Jehovah and one of the most powerful angels, they were faced with the challenge of explaining how he came to be the evil one, set apart from God and his goodness. This transformation was generally understood to result from a catastrophic act of rebellion on Satan's part, an explanation that was widely embraced by the New Testament authors. The prevailing view was that Satan abandoned his exalted position due to sin, and that the sin was pride. One statement, attributed to Jesus, that speaks of seeing Satan fall from heaven like lightning, came to be seen as a reference to this punishment for pride. This idea was further reinforced by a vision of a great heavenly conflict in which Michael and his angels fought against a dragon and his host. The dragon, identified as the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the world, was defeated and cast out of heaven, along with his followers. Following his fall, Satan was generally believed to have become the ruler of a kingdom composed of principalities, powers, and demonic forces under his authority. His domain was once thought to be centered in Pergamos, a place where a faithful Christian, Antipas, suffered martyrdom. At other times, his sphere was believed to be the air or the firmament. One apostle even went so far as to assign Satan dominion over the entire world. Those who belong to his kingdom are described as individuals who have deeply strayed from the faith, and perhaps from moral conduct as well. People expelled from the church are sometimes said to be delivered over to Satan, not for their destruction, but in the hope of bringing about their reform. His realm is also inhabited by the sinful and the unrighteous, as well as by those possessed by a spirit of deceit and violence. One gospel passage refers to Satan's dominion as a realm of demons, while another vision describes how, during his fall, he drew with him a third of the stars, understood as part of the heavenly host. Humanity's own appreciation for beauty is portrayed as a potential avenue for temptation, since Satan is often said to appear in a form of striking radiance and splendor, closely resembling one of God's angels. This, however, is not his only guise. At times, he takes on the fearsome image of a roaring lion, seeking victims to destroy. In the account of Eve, he appears not as an angel of light or a lion, but as a serpent, subtle and deceptive. Across both the Old and New Testaments, Satan's character is thoroughly described, bearing the full color of death and associated with every form of wrongdoing. He is depicted as having a nature fundamentally opposed to all goodness, and as the chief adversary of both God and humanity. His goal is to reverse the work of God, to turn people away from divine truth, and to obstruct their salvation. He works tirelessly to draw people into sin. His influence extends even into the material world. He is sometimes seen as a cause of illness, financial loss, and grief. With access to the inner life of human beings, he deceives them, leading many to obey him knowingly or unknowingly. He is responsible for the temptation and fall of Adam and Eve. He brings about demonic possession. He snatches away the word of truth from the hearts of those who are ignorant or distracted. He is blamed for the betrayal by Judas, the denial by Peter, and even for the temptation of Christ himself. He is the one who incited Ananias and Sapphira to lie to the Holy Spirit. He obstructs Paul's mission, even sending a messenger to torment him. He sets traps and devises cunning strategies to harm the faithful, using his subtlety to lead them astray. Christ explicitly calls him a murderer and a liar. Despite this elaborate portrayal, some uncertainty and contradictions arise when examining Scripture for a definitive view on Satan's ultimate fate. Over centuries, countless devout minds have worked to shape this figure as a symbol of all evil, yet the mystery of evil remains unresolved. Still, in times when religious belief formed the boundaries of thought, it must have been a great comfort to believe that Satan operated only under God's permission, that though he may gain the upper hand against believers at times, he will ultimately be crushed beneath their feet. Even as he acts as the force behind the workings of the man of sin, the promise remains that he will one day be driven from the world, bound, and cast into an eternal lake of fire, prepared for him and his angels. It is believed that Christ came into the world to undo Satan's work, to bring him to nothing, and to liberate those enslaved by him. It is somewhat unexpected, given the firm promises concerning Satan's defeat, to find statements suggesting that in the final apostasy, he will once again lead humanity astray through false prophecy, lies, and deceptive wonders. Even after being imprisoned in the abyss for an extended period, he is said to be released once more to carry out his work on earth. Yet, despite these troubling forecasts, the ultimate declaration on the matter offers a powerful and uplifting assurance. The devil who deceived humanity will be cast into a lake of fire and brimstone, alongside the beast and the false prophet, where they shall suffer torment endlessly, without end. The character of Lucifer, as depicted in the tragical history of Doctor Faustus, stands in stark contrast to the sorrowful Lucifer of Dante's vision. No longer immobilized in frozen despair, this Lucifer is free to move across the earth at will, continuing his efforts among humankind. His nature is clearly drawn in the play, though the text itself has undergone numerous alterations, leaving the authorship of nearly every line uncertain. As one scholar observed, the play presents one of the most difficult textual challenges critics have faced since the habit began of losing the most meaningful parts of a writer's work. Nevertheless, while the issue of authorship does matter, since mixed hands can result in inconsistencies in character, it is of lesser importance for understanding the overall portrayal of Lucifer. This interpretation draws on the version of the text believed to be closest to the original, the edition from the early 1600s. More relevant, perhaps, is the source material behind the drama. The Faust legend appears to be inspired by, or at least centered on, an actual historical figure bearing a similar name, who lived in Germany in the early 15th century. His life, along with the miraculous acts attributed to him, is referenced in many letters from that era. These various accounts were eventually gathered and published in a book in Frankfurt in the late 16th century. The book quickly gained attention, and within a year, an English verse adaptation received approval from the Bishop of London. Likely within the same year, an English prose translation appeared, followed by a revised version a few years later. Marlowe is believed to have based his drama on the 1588 translation, following its narrative closely. Charles Lamb once remarked that this story must have been irresistible to a mind like Marlowe's. He had a passion for exploring the forbidden, for drawing near to dark mysteries, and for pondering the most decayed and dangerous ideas hidden within the core of knowledge. Whether these were truly the speculations Lamb described, some critics, echoing the view of Ellis Fermor, maintain that Marlowe crafted from them one of the most striking portrayals of spiritual tragedy ever written. The play begins with Faustus reflecting on the emptiness of all forms of human knowledge. Neither logic, medicine, law, nor theology brings him fulfillment. His dissatisfaction, unlike that of Goethe's Faust, who longs for the essence of life itself, stems, as one commentator notes, from a more common but powerful craving, the desire to be all-powerful. Having already contemplated the divine mysteries, Faustus chooses what Mephistophilis refers to as the quickest path. He renounces the Trinity and turns his prayers with solemn devotion to the Prince of Hell. To his surprise, his invocation is promptly answered by the appearance of Mephistophilis, servant to the great Lucifer. Accounts of the play's performance from earlier centuries speak to the unsettling realism of this moment. Some even claimed that the summoning had, on one occasion, been so authentic that a real devil had appeared. Reports from the time describe how, during a performance at a well-known playhouse, a visible apparition caused panic among both actors and audience. It was said that some were so terrified by the sight that they were left permanently disturbed. There were also stories of audience members unable to distinguish the actual devil from those portrayed on stage, especially when the building itself creaked and stirred their fears. One old pamphlet recalls Lucifer referencing a follower who wore a head of hair like one of my devils in Doctor Faustus, a detail that haunted theatre-goers when strange sounds filled the venue. As in the Eumenides by Aeschylus, the central struggle of the play is not between mortals and earthly powers, but between a man and spiritual forces. The true setting of the drama is not bound to any physical location, but exists within the vast landscape of the human mind. The battle, as one critic observes, is not for worldly power or political rule, but for the destiny of the human soul. Faustus stands at a crossroads, faced with a choice between spiritual liberation and eternal bondage to dark powers. This, then, is the stage for one of the most profound conflicts ever presented in dramatic form. After some negotiation, Faustus agrees to sell his soul to Lucifer in exchange for a life of indulgence and pleasure lasting 24 years, during which Mephistophilis is to remain his constant and obedient servant. Faustus signs the pact in his own blood, although for a brief moment he imagines the blood spells out a warning, "O homo, fugue! O man, flee!" Dismissing it as a mere illusion, he proceeds. But the memory of that vision lingers, haunting him, never allowing him to find true peace again. With the bond now sealed, Faustus wastes no time and begins to question Mephistophilis eagerly. One of his first requests is for a wife, which Mephistophilis refuses. Faustus, with a strangely childish distraction, immediately abandons that wish and asks instead for a book that contains all knowledge. This request, unlike the previous one, is fulfilled, just as every request is, unless it contradicts the interests of Hell's dominion. While Mephistophilis occasionally appears uncertain on matters like geography or astronomy, he answers sincerely and as accurately as he can. As the weight of his decision begins to crush him, Faustus repeatedly turns to repentance and finally follows the urging of his good angel, calling upon Christ for mercy. But no sooner does he make this plea than the dreadful trio, Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Mephistophilis, appear before him. Through a dramatic display of the 7 deadly sins, the promise of future pleasures, and the fulfillment of every desire of his heart, they quickly draw him back into their grasp, regaining his wavering loyalty. For a time, it seems that Faustus's soul finds some measure of satisfaction in childish mischief, such as mocking the Pope in Rome and engaging in foolish antics with a horse dealer. These scenes, filled with immature humor, seem to undercut the gravity of the tale, making it difficult to support the claim that Marlowe treated the original legend with the depth and grandeur it deserved. A more fitting view may be that of Ellen Crofts, who argued that the play lacks spiritual or theological depth, and that Marlowe's absence of religious conviction prevented him from delivering a final scene with the solemnity and weight it might have carried. Time passes, and Faustus becomes known far and wide as a man of remarkable powers, yet the end of his bargain draws near. An old man pleads with him to repent, but Faustus, hardened by years of sin, cannot. His students attempt to save him, but to no avail. In a scene of remarkable emotional power and honesty, especially for a modern reader who may see Faustus's worst offense as little more than a lapse in taste rather than in morality, he faces the final hour in torment. The seconds drag by in dread, and Faustus, overwhelmed by terror, begs the rocks to hide him. As the clock strikes midnight, Mephistophilis returns, and Faustus is seized and dragged down to hell. The central theme of the drama, the wages of sin is death, closely follows the biblical message, as Marlowe does wherever Scripture provides a foundation. Mephistophilis explains that Lucifer was once a radiant and beloved angel, beautiful and bright, who, through pride and defiance, was cast from heaven by God. He describes himself as one of the countless spirits who fell with Lucifer, conspired with him, and are now eternally damned alongside him. In addition to Mephistophilis and Lucifer, the play features two other sinister figures, Beelzebub and the evil angel. The origin of the evil angel, possibly intended as a personification of Faustus's corrupted conscience, is never clearly explained. As for Beelzebub, some clarification is needed. In the conjuration Faustus uses to summon Mephistophilis, he addresses his prayer to Beelzebub, Prince of the East, ruler of the fiery realms, a title he later uses for Lucifer as well. At one point, during one of his moments of internal conflict, Faustus even advises himself to trust in Beelzebub, though no direct pact was ever made with that name. Mephistophilis refers only to Lucifer during the earlier conversation about their agreement. Eventually, however, both Lucifer and Beelzebub appear before Faustus as separate beings, with Beelzebub introduced by Lucifer as his companion prince in hell. While the characters in Doctor Faustus may at times appear unclear in their motivations, the realm over which they hold power is portrayed with vivid precision. One central idea stands out unmistakably: Marlowe's depiction of hell, which is not confined to a specific location, but is instead shown as a psychological condition, a state of mind, a person's perception of the world. Mephistophilis offers insight into this view early in the play when he declares that he is in hell, even when not physically there. Having once experienced the presence of God and the eternal joy of heaven, he now suffers countless torments simply from being separated from that bliss. When pressed for a more concrete explanation of hell's location, Mephistophilis responds that it lies under the heavens. Faustus, still unsatisfied, asks for a more specific answer. Mephistophilis then explains that hell exists within the very elements themselves, where the damned are eternally tortured. Hell, he insists, has no boundaries and is not limited to one specific place. Wherever the damned are, there is hell, and when the world ends and all things are judged, every place not heaven will become hell. Faustus himself later gives a more traditional description, invoking the realms of infernal rule, including Styx, Acheron, and the fiery lake of ever-burning Phlegethon. According to Mephistophilis, the inhabitants of Lucifer's domain are those who joined in rebellion, failed, and were cast down alongside their leader. Other denizens include mighty rulers who tremble in fear beneath the gaze of hell's dark sovereign, upon whose altars countless souls are sacrificed. A particularly terrifying image comes from Faustus at the moment of death, when he calls out to the serpents and adders of hell, begging them to let him breathe. The role of Satan's influence in the world is compelling, especially in its threefold expression through Lucifer, the evil angel, and Mephistophilis. Of these, Mephistophilis is the most fully realized character. In fact, he emerges as more sympathetic and admirable than Faustus himself, who comes across as cowardly and deceitful. Mephistophilis's evil nature appears not so much inherent as carefully crafted by Marlowe to meet the tastes of an audience eager for devils and grim entertainment. In form, Mephistophilis, like Lucifer, appears so hideous upon first arrival that Faustus recoils in horror and demands that he assume a more pleasing appearance, that of a friar. This not only reflects a sharp jab at the church, but also provides Faustus with a servant more agreeable to accompany him. However unpleasant Mephistophilis may appear outwardly, his character is marked by a surprisingly consistent and, given the circumstances, unexpected honesty. His statements to Faustus are largely accurate, his loyalty to his master is unwavering, and he fulfills his side of the pact without deviation. He does not conceal from Faustus the fact that he himself endures the same eternal torment that Faustus too must one day face, the endless agony brought by the memory of lost heavenly bliss. When Faustus continues to press the issue, Mephistophilis pleads with him to abandon such thoughts, which stir terror within his own anguished soul. He debates Faustus on the reality of hell and punishment, pointing to himself as living proof, confessing that he is damned and presently in hell. Even again, he insists that spirits suffer pain just as intensely as human souls do. Faustus is never deceived about the price he must pay for the pact. The consequences are made clear. Only when Faustus begins to waver with childlike indecision does Mephistophilis resort to a more frustrated and nearly scornful tone, questioning whether Faustus truly believes heaven to be so glorious, even claiming that Faustus himself is more fair than it. When Faustus stubbornly clings to the notion that hell is a fiction, Mephistophilis, having argued the truth to no avail, responds with tired contempt, urging him to keep believing so, until experience teaches otherwise. It is difficult to fault Mephistophilis for his scorn toward Faustus's unreliable word and his demand that the pact be confirmed through a bond, signed and sealed. He fulfills both the spirit and the letter of the agreement, not only by serving Faustus dutifully, but also by becoming his companion, singing ancient verses, discussing the stars, and joining in the foolish mischief played on the horse-dealer and the church officials. Yet even in these moments of apparent light-heartedness, he remains loyal to the will of Lucifer. Whenever Faustus threatens to go beyond control, Mephistophilis quickly summons Lucifer and Beelzebub. At times, he threatens Faustus with torment, though Faustus, unlike the defiant Prometheus of myth, is so frightened by the mere idea of pain that such threats never need to be fulfilled. Lucifer, notably a unique portrayal in this context, complete with a mother, is nearly the opposite of Mephistophilis. While Mephistophilis remains truthful about the nature of hell, Lucifer is characterized by cunning and deceit. He vows to highly gratify Faustus and presents a spectacle of the 7 deadly sins to distract his naive mind from any thought of ending the pact. Once Faustus expresses delight in the show, Lucifer, in direct opposition to Mephistophilis' truthful depictions, assures him that in hell is all manner of delight. He even promises Faustus a journey to hell and back at midnight, though according to the text, this promise is never kept. Whether this omission is the fault of the devil or the dramatist is uncertain. After all, not everything could be staged in the theatre of that era. The evil angel, whether seen as a servant of Lucifer or a projection of Faustus' own despairing conscience, consistently represents evil and resembles the traditional figure of Satan more than either Mephistophilis or Lucifer. Often a voice of denial and temptation, he always seems to know exactly what to say to sway Faustus. From his very first appearance, he speaks like Lucifer himself, urging Faustus to pursue the art that contains all the secrets of nature, and to become a ruler of the elements, as powerful on earth as Jove is in the heavens. He dismisses repentance, prayer, and contrition as mere illusions, mad delusions that deceive those who trust them, and urges Faustus instead to think of honor and of wealth. That final promise of riches is enough to win Faustus over, prompting him to summon Mephistophilis and seal the pact. On another visit, when the good angel invites Faustus to repent and seek God's mercy, the evil angel counters by claiming that Faustus, being now a spirit, is beyond pity. When Faustus hesitates to believe this, the evil angel concedes the lie but asserts with certainty that Faustus never shall repent, which at once convinces Faustus that his heart is too hardened for salvation. In despair, Faustus declares he can barely even speak the words salvation, faith, or heaven. On his final appearance, when Faustus again wavers, the evil angel, echoing Mephistophilis, warns that devils will tear him apart. Yet this time, Faustus is no longer frightened by the threat of physical suffering and begins to repent so deeply that it takes the combined effort of Lucifer, Beelzebub, and Mephistophilis to reclaim him. The play itself shows little concern for any final defeat of Satan's power, since its central conflict concludes with the departure of Satan and his demons. At the time the play was written, earlier scriptural visions, such as the one predicting Satan's release after being bound for a time, had largely faded from popular thought, replaced by the more reassuring belief that he would be cast forever into the lake of eternal fire. Mephistophilis speaks of being forever damned, describing Lucifer's realm as perpetual, a place where we must ever be. Faustus, seemingly without much hope of mercy, pleads to be allowed to live in hell 1,000 years, 100,000, and at last be saved. Yet he condemns this hope himself, acknowledging that no end is limited to damned souls. Near the end, his words carry the grim weight of endless torment. In hell forever, hell, hell forever. In contrast, Milton portrays Lucifer with grandeur and nobility so pronounced that many critics have argued the entire epic of Paradise Lost serves primarily to provide a fitting stage for this magnificent figure. Others find the notion of the archfiend as the hero offensive and have zealously searched, often misguidedly, for another character or idea to take that role. Milton's complex and sometimes obscure language has been thoroughly analyzed, leading to some unusual conclusions. For this discussion, it is unnecessary to settle whether Lucifer or another character is the true hero of Paradise Lost. Instead, insights from various interpretations will be used to help sketch the character of Lucifer, who remains the focal point of centuries of debate. Early critics largely agreed in seeing Satan as the epic's hero, so much so that these commentators are often labeled Satanists. William Blake famously remarked that Milton himself was of the devil's party without knowing it, reflecting this view. Lascelles Abercrombie presents the case forcefully, comparing Satan's central role in Paradise Lost to that of Achilles in the Iliad or Odysseus in the Odyssey. He argues that Satan's unyielding torment symbolizes the profound conflict at the heart of modern consciousness. Weldon takes a more measured stance, noting that Milton's artistry gives Satan such dignity that despite his rebellion against God, he earns sympathy and even respect from many Christians. Forsyth implies rather than outright claims Lucifer as the hero, observing that Milton's God represents a resolute authority that creates rebels. Satan initially gains sympathy as a rebel opposing what he sees as arbitrary divine decree. This conflict is portrayed not as one between gods and mortals or titans, but as a struggle within divine beings themselves. Satan, possibly the senior created being, embodies reason, personality, and freedom in opposition to oppressive power. The general critical consensus leans toward the view that Milton's primary sympathy lies with Satan. David Masson strongly affirms Satan as the hero of Paradise Lost. He argues that Satan is the central figure through whom the connection between the new world of man and the vast pre-human universe of the poem is made. According to Masson, Satan's role and actions are the essential link in this cosmic framework. Larson, while not fully aligned with the Satanist view himself, provides a balanced summary of the arguments supporting Lucifer as the hero. He points out that much commentary on Milton's Satan is superficial and uncritical. Satan is portrayed as a grand and sublime figure, the heroic adversary of God, whose hopeless struggle nonetheless captivates and commands admiration. Larson suggests that Milton likely crafted Satan to be a compelling protagonist in a tragedy, someone not petty but capable of evoking sympathy. Ultimately, he views Satan as the poem's central figure and probable hero. E.N.S. Thompson adds a nuanced perspective, noting that readers who focus mainly on the early books of Paradise Lost are naturally drawn to Satan's powerful and forceful personality. This often leads to the conclusion that Satan is the hero and Milton's spokesman. Romantic poets like Byron and Shelley, influenced by their own idealized views of liberty, reinforced this misinterpretation. However, Thompson stresses that Satan is neither the strongest nor most inspiring character in the poem. The true hero of the first part is Christ, while Adam holds that role in the second. This contrasts sharply with Thomas Davidson's opinion, who dismisses Satan as a hero and instead portrays Christ as God's perfect, good little boy, with much of the poem devoted to showcasing Christ's impeccable nature and power. Emily Hickey goes further, arguing that Satan was never intended to be a hero. She traces his moral and spiritual decline as a deliberate and continuous process Milton planned from the start. Dennis Sorat offers an original theory, suggesting that Milton and Satan are personal enemies due to their similarities, with Milton himself becoming the real hero of the story. Sorat claims Milton throws himself personally into the struggle against Satan, making Milton, not God or the Son, the one who ultimately overcomes the archfiend. Tilliard presents a significant objection to the idea of Satan as the hero. Satan's grandeur is largely limited to the poem's first half, and the second half adds little to his significance. Yet Tilliard acknowledges that Milton may have unconsciously sympathized with Satan, who embodies the heroic energy Milton admired. Still, Tilliard contends that the true hero is neither Milton, Satan, Christ, nor God, but rather the human struggle against sin itself. Larson, who once suggested that Satan might be the hero of Paradise Lost, later shifts his position by stating that the poem contains no hero at all. He argues that Milton was not concerned with heroes, whether human or divine, but was instead absorbed in the metaphysical and ethical problem of good and evil. According to Larson, Milton's complete solution to this problem is revealed through the depiction of Satan as a cosmic, though finite, power. While this may not resolve the debate over who, if anyone, truly is the hero of Paradise Lost, the many differing opinions remind us of the wisdom of Solomon. The glory of God is to conceal a thing, the glory of the king is to find it out. Milton followed a long tradition of obscurity. It also becomes clear that a character who provokes such sustained critical controversy must himself be a study in conflict. Amid the many uncertainties, it is helpful to return directly to Milton himself, where it is evident that he conscientiously adhered to what he recognized as authoritative, the Bible. In tracing the origin of the archfiend, Milton follows biblical and early church traditions in presenting Satan as created long before the visible universe. He is depicted as the angel of the morning star, admired by his followers for his beauty and strength, ranking second only to God in power and goodness. C.A. Moore observes that the gradual degeneration of Satan in Paradise Lost roughly parallels the stages of his moral decline portrayed in biblical texts such as Job, Zechariah, and Chronicles. This Lucifer, created among the highest angels, if not the chief, with every reason to rejoice in heaven, nonetheless rebelled against the one being above him in authority. Earlier writers, following biblical narratives, grappled with explaining why such a privileged being would choose to rebel. One explanation, drawn from a passage in Genesis, suggested that angels envied humans after seeing the daughters of men were fair, and so abandoned their heavenly status to mate with these women. This interpretation was supported by early church fathers like Clement of Alexandria, Tertullian, Eusebius, and Ambrose. Other authorities rejected this view, and Philostrius categorized it as heretical. However, the more commonly accepted medieval understanding did not blame lust or intemperance, but pride, sometimes combined with envy, as the cause of Lucifer's fall. Pride is explicitly identified as the cause in Isaiah, and this view was emphasized by church fathers such as Augustine and Eusebius. Others, including Gregory Nazianzen and Cassian, added envy as an additional factor. Dustour notes that medieval interpreters had no doubt about Lucifer's pride being the key cause of his downfall. In fact, many Old and Middle English references explicitly state that his pride, often inflamed by the awareness of his own surpassing beauty, was what led to his fall. When examining Milton's explanation for the rebellion in heaven, it becomes clear that he diverges significantly from the common medieval views on the subject. Milton's Lucifer, like the figure from popular tradition, is full of excessive pride and ambition. Lifted up so high, disdained subjection, and thought one step higher would set me highest. In Paradise Lost, it is described that Lucifer's pride led to his expulsion from heaven, along with all the angels who rebelled with him. Aspiring to place himself above his peers, he trusted that he could equal the Most High. He opposed God's throne and monarchy, raising a proud and impious war in heaven, though his attempt was ultimately vain. It is true that Lucifer's pride also awakens envy in his heart. However, his envy towards man, either created or to be created, arises only after his fall. While still unfallen, his envy is directed at the Son of God. It is here that Milton notably breaks from most medieval predecessors in interpreting this legend. Upon hearing God's arbitrary decree that all the heavenly hosts must worship his Son, Lucifer retreats to the north, claiming to prepare a suitable reception for the Messiah. The rebellion's form is largely shaped by Isaiah's account, which mentions the north as the region where Lucifer desires to establish his kingdom, a detail often overlooked, as noted by Doctor. Milton incorporates this popular Isaiah interpretation while adding subtle nuances to enhance realism and dramatic effect. Lucifer's goal is to dislodge and leave the supreme throne unworshipped, unobeyed, and held in contempt. To achieve this, he marches northward with his entire host. In Paradise Lost, the north is regarded as Lucifer's domain. He commands his followers to hasten homeward with flying march to the quarters of the north. Together they reach the limits of this region, and Satan takes his royal seat high on a hill, blazing brightly as a mount raised on a mount. Yet, holding the north is not enough for Milton's prime rebel. He contemplates open warfare with the Lord of Heaven. The Almighty warns his son of a rising foe who plans to set his throne equal to theirs throughout the spacious north, and is willing to test their power and right in battle. In response, Michael and Gabriel are sent out to confront Lucifer. The battle endures for days, with the heavenly angels resorting to tearing up great mountains in order to temporarily overwhelm their adversaries. The tumult did not end quickly. On the third day, God sends the Messiah, his Son, who has been reserved the glory of that ultimate victory. Empowered by his Father, the Son arrives at the battleground, commanding all his legions to stand firm on both sides. Riding in his chariot accompanied by thunder, he drives into the midst of the enemy forces, relentlessly pursuing them toward the gates of heaven. As the gates open, the defeated rebels leap down in terror and confusion into the place of punishment prepared for them in the depths below. Doctor highlights the account from Revelation where Michael and his angels fight and eventually overthrow the dragon and his followers. Milton draws from this version but offers a distinctive and unorthodox interpretation. In Paradise Lost, Michael, supported by all the angels including Gabriel, battles the rebel army but cannot defeat it. Instead, this victory is reserved for Christ alone. The angelic battle lasts 2 days and remains unresolved until the third day, when Christ, acting alone, overwhelms the sons of darkness and expels them from heaven. This emphasis on Christ's singular triumph may have been inspired by a passage in Revelation, but it clearly reflects Milton's personal belief rather than mere epic convenience. In his Christian doctrine, Milton clarifies that while many think Michael represents Christ, it is Christ who defeats the devil alone. Michael appears as a commanding angel leading the heavenly forces in battle against the prince of devils, both armies arrayed and ending in an uncertain conflict. The place to which the fallen angels were cast is known as Hell, the dreadful realm of Lucifer's banishment. Scholars and critics have long debated how to precisely depict this kingdom within Milton's cosmology. Numerous attempts, including maps and diagrams by noted Milton scholars such as Masson, Himes, Sprague, Orchard, Hanford, and Warren, have tried to visualize Milton's universe. Yet many, including Warren, argue that such efforts are ultimately futile because Milton's beings and movements exist beyond physical space and time. Hanford concurs, warning that creating detailed plans of Milton's universe is misleading, despite many such attempts, including his own and Warren's. To grasp the later events of Paradise Lost with any clarity, it is essential to form some understanding of Milton's vision of the universe. Hanford explains that since the physical action unfolds across heaven, earth, and hell, Milton had to imagine the structure of the cosmos. For this, he committed to one of the 2 competing astronomical models of his time, the Ptolemaic and the Copernican systems. Milton chose the Ptolemaic system, which places the earth fixed at the center of the universe with heavenly bodies revolving around it. This choice aligned with established poetic and theological traditions and suited imaginative storytelling better. Although Milton was well versed in the mathematical details of this system, he was also familiar with Copernican astronomy, having read Galileo's works and understood its arguments. His personal view seems to have been one of suspended judgment, as he even allows an angel to present both theories to Adam in Paradise Lost, implying that no mortal can be absolutely certain which is correct. Wherever possible, Milton drew on scriptural hints and carefully avoided anything that would directly contradict Holy Writ. Features such as the causeway from hell to earth, the chain suspending the visible universe from heaven, or the spheres that carried planets and stars were imaginative devices rather than concrete facts. These elements were artistic representations that might or might not reflect reality. Milton imagined infinite space as originally divided into two parts: heaven above, also called the empyrean, and chaos or uncreated matter below. David Masson adds that chaos is a vast, boundless abyss, a dark, lifeless ocean where the raw, undifferentiated elements of all matter are mixed in violent confusion. It is a realm without light, earth, water, air, or fire, but rather a formless mass where all these lie intermingled. Although the divine presence is potentially there, it is withdrawn, leaving the realm in disorder and darkness. Angels do not venture into this forbidding space, which is separated from heaven by a crystal floor or wall. Beneath that barrier, chaos howls, rages, and stagnates endlessly, visited only faintly by distant glimmers of light. At the lowest part of this chaos lies a distinct Antarctic region, hell. It is described as a vast domain of fire, sulphurous lakes, plains, mountains, and all forms of fiery and icy torment. This is the dungeon-like space into which the fallen angels are cast, separated from heaven by a great expanse of chaos. 4 days and nights, they fall or are driven through chaos by the Messiah's thunderous pursuit before finally reaching this dark prison. Upon their arrival, the gates close behind them, sealing their confinement. Following hell, Milton envisions the visible universe, commonly called the world, designed as a dwelling place for humanity. This universe features the earth fixed at its center, surrounded by a series of concentric spheres that move at different speeds. Beyond these spheres lies chaos. There are 10 such spheres in total. The first 7, starting from the closest to Earth, carry the planets, including the Sun and Moon. The 8th sphere, known as the firmament or coelum stellatum, holds all the fixed stars. The 9th, called the crystalline, contains no celestial bodies and is thought by Milton to be composed of water. The 10th sphere, the primum mobile, or the first moved in Milton's words, is responsible for imparting motion to all the others. Milton seems to have imagined this entire system enclosed within a solid, opaque, and immovable shell. To avoid confusion from seeming contradictions, it is important to recognize that Milton describes 2 forms of hell, or rather 2 expressions of the same hell. The first is the physical dwelling of the fallen angels, as previously detailed. The second is a subjective hell, described by Milton as boundless and without bars. He refers to this inner hell in Paradise Lost when he says that hell is within a person, that it follows them wherever they go, and cannot be escaped by mere change of place. This internal hell, filled with remorse and haunted by the memory of happier times, closely resembles the hell depicted by Dante, a realm of torment born from conscience and regret. In stark contrast, the external hell, the home of the evil spirits, lies far removed from God, many times the distance between day and night, and is a place of dreadful despair. It causes even the mighty Lucifer to feel deep sorrow as he surveys this desolate wasteland. Milton describes it as a dreadful dungeon surrounded on all sides by flames that emit no light, but only a darkness visible, revealing endless suffering. It is a realm of sorrow and shadows where peace and rest never dwell, hope is absent, and torture continues without end, sustained by ever-burning sulfur that is never consumed. This place was prepared by eternal justice for the rebellious spirits. Their prison is set in utter darkness, and as far from God and the light of heaven as the center of the universe is from its farthest poles. It stands in stark opposition to the place from which they fell. The inhabitants of this dreadful realm are exclusively those who fell alongside Lucifer. Humanity, represented by Adam and Eve and newly created, has not yet entered this domain. Earlier writers often did not concern themselves with specifying the exact numbers between the fallen and the obedient angels. They generally suggested that a large portion suffered exile. The biblical Apocalypse states that the great dragon drew after him a third of the stars of heaven, and Milton remains faithful to this scriptural account. In Paradise Lost, readers are cautioned not to take Satan's inflated claims about his forces at face value. Though he boasts of leading potent legions whose exile hath emptied heaven, and claims to have freed nearly half the angelic host in one night, these declarations are exaggerated. The epic consistently refers to the traitor angel as having led away no more than a third of heaven's angels. This third appears to consist entirely of those within Lucifer's hierarchy. For instance, Beelzebub is commanded by Lucifer to summon the regent powers under him regent, indicating the organized leadership among the fallen. While Milton repeatedly sets the number of the fallen as a third of heaven's host, he uses suggestion to convey the vastness of that multitude. God, when instructing Michael, refers to the rebellious forces as thousands and millions. Satan himself recalls leading an innumerable force of spirits into the first assault, describing their numbers as millions of flaming swords drawn from mighty cherubim, illuminating hell with their sudden blaze. He further depicts his army as a massive host, with thousands of banners, a forest of spears, countless helmets, and shields arranged in an immeasurable depth. The imagery evokes the biblical plague of locusts raised by Moses in Egypt, darkening the land like a dense, overwhelming swarm, emphasizing the numberless bad angels. Regarding the punishments of these fallen angels, Milton does not indicate any variation in their sufferings. Lucifer addresses his followers with grand titles such as princes, potentates, warriors, the flower of heaven, and names several lieutenants destined to become gods in pagan mythology. Among these are Moloch, Chemos, Osiris, Ashtoreth, Tammuz, Dagon, Rimmon, Isis, Oris, Belial, Titan, Saturn, Mammon, and Mulciber. Many of these figures stand apart from the main body of hell's inhabitants, offering counsel to Lucifer during the council at Pandemonium. Pandemonium must be included in any account of Lucifer's hell. This grand palace was designed by Mulciber and constructed in an incredibly short time. From the earth, a vast structure arose like a breath, accompanied by sweet music and harmonious voices. It resembled a temple, with pilasters surrounding it and Doric columns adorned with golden architraves. The building featured cornices and friezes decorated with carved reliefs. The towering edifice stood firm, and its massive bronze doors opened to reveal spacious interiors with smooth, level floors. From the arched ceiling, rows of starry lamps and blazing cressets hung, fueled by naphtha and asphaltus, casting a light as bright as the sky itself. It was within this newly built palace that the Council of the Fallen was held. Satan sat exalted by merit, lifted from despair to a high position, and from this height he aspired insatiably to continue his vain war against heaven. He laid out their predicament and sought counsel on how to proceed in opposing the Almighty. Moloch, fiery and rash, immediately urged open warfare. Belial, smooth yet deceitful, advocated for peace at any cost. Mammon, true to his later reputation, encouraged the exploitation and enrichment of their own domain. But Beelzebub, Lucifer's loyal second-in-command, rose with an imposing presence. His face reflected deep thought, public responsibility, and noble counsel shining through the ruin of their state. Beelzebub spoke of the new world created for mankind and proposed a daring plan, to either destroy it completely with hellfire or to claim it for themselves, driving out the weak inhabitants or seducing them to their cause. This bold proposal pleased the infernal assembly, and joy sparked in their eyes as they voted their approval. Then came the difficult question: who would undertake this perilous mission into the unknown world? Silence fell as all sat lost in thought, each seeing their own fear mirrored in others' faces. Finally, Satan, now elevated above his peers in glory and aware of his supreme worth, spoke with monarchical pride. He declared that he alone would venture forth through the realms of destruction to seek deliverance for them all, stating that no one would join him in this enterprise. Before following Lucifer into the realms that Dr. Johnson, with a fearful and sincere reverence, declined to explore alongside Milton, it is essential to examine Lucifer's character more closely. This deeper understanding reveals the inner moral drama unfolding within him, even as the external drama of temptation plays out. Larson observes that the moral conflict in the archfiend is particularly compelling because, compared to humans, he is inherently greater and was once magnificently admirable before his fall began. Satan's character experiences a remarkable and gradual spiritual decline. Angels and humans share essential similarities. Fiends are essentially superior and more ethereal versions of men. There is no true conflict between God and a creature because every finite being is a self-governing moral entity. These truths suggest that Milton's depiction of Satan expresses an ethical philosophy that applies directly to human beings. To grasp how this philosophy applies, one must consider Milton's metaphysical ideas, especially the nature of broken union and the law denied when sin occurs. God is the ultimate law of the universe, reflected within human conscience or reason. Larson explains that God is practically synonymous with reason. Milton's proofs of God's existence emphasize this. God is the force of conscience within the human soul, a law present in every finite mind. This concept is repeatedly emphasized by Milton. When humanity fell, it lost both liberty and reason simultaneously. Before the fall, Eve could declare that they lived by their own law, with reason as their guiding principle. Larson argues that sin is acting against this innate reason, which is free and rightly ordered. What must be avoided is lawless, irrational passion that distorts judgment. Sin, therefore, is the dominance of passion over reason. This misrule is consistent whether in the cosmos at large or within the individual finite being. It represents the breaking of unity, the separation of the finite from the infinite, and by severing man from the source of his true reality, it causes his regression into chaos. Larson continues by describing Satan as an excellent, admirable, and glorious creature, but still only a creature. He was a powerful reasoner, yet his reasoning held one crucial flaw. He believed he could defy the fundamental law of existence. This belief stemmed from his mistaken idea that his own being was self-originated. His error lay in failing to realize that he was a part of God, and that his greatness and glory depended entirely on remaining close to God and striving ever nearer to him. At the start of Paradise Lost, Satan stood near the pinnacle of creation, but as he pursued his evil course, he descended toward chaos, finding his only solace in dragging others down with him into his inevitable ruin. This is the core of the great moral tragedy. Satan not only perceives his ongoing degradation and growing misery, but he also knows that, compelled by his nature, he must commit evil to satisfy the evil within him. Moreover, he understands that the harm he inflicts on others will inevitably rebound upon himself, intensifying his own suffering and making his torment ever more unbearable. In literature, he remains the most tragic figure. Unlike mortals consumed by despair, he cannot hope for an end to his anguish. Physically, intellectually, and morally, Satan appears in the opening books of Paradise Lost as unmatched. He relies on his own strength, is direct in his dealings, commands the fallen angels by merit of power and integrity, seeks no deceit, and openly acknowledges his defeat, though not, apparently, his inferiority. Scholar Miss Woodhull offers an insightful theory that Lucifer's punishment is largely tied to his sense of beauty. She argues that Milton initially portrayed him as suffering because of his awareness of beauty. Hell's surroundings repel him by their grotesque ugliness, starkly contrasting with heaven's radiant beauty. Yet Satan is resolved that he remains unchanged and continues to trust his own strength. His first major setback comes when the guardian angel reveals his altered appearance at Eden's gate. However, his degradation likely began well before this moment. He had already resorted to hypocrisy and deceit more than once, and seemed to adopt such tactics as his usual means of achieving his aims. When he reaches the sun, he approaches its guardian, Uriel, disguised as a minor angel of light. So spake the false dissembler unperceived, for neither man nor angel can discern hypocrisy, the only veil that walks invisible, except to God alone. Yet in the opening scene of the following book, Satan is suddenly overwhelmed by remorse, recalling, "From what state I fell, how glorious once." This moment of regret contrasts sharply with the outward confidence he displayed before his followers in Pandemonium, revealing the deep torment within his soul. At this point, he seems to definitively renounce all that remains noble within him and fully dedicate himself to evil. "All good to me is lost, evil, be thou my good." As he draws near to the children of Eden, the last trace of his former angelic nature flickers briefly in a quickly suppressed pity. He addresses them as those whom my thoughts pursue with wonder and could love, yet he proclaims himself, "Yet no purposed foe to you, whom I could pity thus forlorn, though I unpitied." This speech, while beginning in seeming compassion, carries beneath it a tone akin to a sneer. "Hell shall unfold to entertain you too, her widest gates, and send forth all her kings. There will be room, not like these narrow limits, to receive your numerous offspring." Soon after, he is found crouched like a toad near Eve's ear, attempting by his devilish craft to plant in her mind disturbed thoughts, vain hopes, futile aims, and excessive desires inflated by pride. Squat like a toad, close at the ear of Eve, essaying by his devilish art to reach at least distempered, discontented thoughts, vain hopes, vain aims, inordinate desires, blown up with high conceits engendering pride. When struck by the sword wielded by Ithuriel, Satan springs up in his true form, bearing all the proud scorn of the first Lucifer. "If I must contend," he says, "best with the best, the sender, not the sent, or all at once, more glory will be won or less be lost." Facing the sender himself, he responds with a contemptuous expression and rising rage, his defiance firm yet truthful as he defends his valor against the angel's harsh reproach. "Not that I less endure, or shrink from pain, insulting angel, I well thou know'st I stood thy fiercest, when in battle to thy aid the blasting volleyed thunder made all speed, and seconded thy else not dreaded spear. But still thy words at random, as before, argue thy inexperience what behoves, from hard assays and ill successes past, a faithful leader, not to hazard all through ways of danger by himself untired. I therefore, I alone, first undertook to wing the desolate abyss, and spy this new created world, whereof in hell fame is not silent, here in hope to find better abode, and my afflicted powers to settle here on earth, or in mid-air, though for possession put to try once more what thou and thy gay legions dare against, whose easier business were to serve their Lord high up in heaven, with songs to him his throne, and practised distances to cringe, not fight." Here Satan justifies his rebellion as a courageous, if doomed, endeavor, contrasting his own daring with the servile ease of the angels who remain obedient in heaven. Satan has never been accused of lacking courage, yet in the next scene he reveals a more troubling flaw than mere physical bravery, a strong inclination toward Milton's characteristic punning. This prolonged exchange of wordplay with Belial in the narrative once drew Landor's remark that the rebellious angel's first overt crime was punning, and that their fall swiftly followed. However, this episode adds little to the overall portrayal of Satan. Later, he appears again in the Garden of Eden, now taking the form of the serpent to tempt Eve. As Hanford observes, Eve, with a well-meaning but unfortunate domestic impulse, suggests a brief separation from Adam so they can tend the garden without the distractions of affectionate conversation. Adam, in his greater wisdom, criticizes her over-carefulness and cautions her against the danger of exposing herself to the enemy's attack. This apparent undervaluing of her resolve wounds Eve's feelings and casts the first slight shadow over their harmonious relationship. Hanford points out that it remains unclear from the dialogue whether Milton intended Adam's attitude to be faultless and Eve solely responsible for the emerging trouble, though it seems Milton may have leaned that way. The problem is that Eve's confidence is misplaced. When temptation comes, her mind contradicts her apparent calm readiness. As Tilliard notes, it is not a surge of intense passion that overwhelms her, but rather a triviality of mind. She suffers from a mix of feelings, yet it is her trivial nature that ultimately allows her to be preyed upon. Satan's full descent into contemptible depths is shown in his manner of tempting Eve. To approach her, he takes on the lowest form of animal found in the garden, a serpent. Moving like a creeping black mist through every thicket, whether dank or dry, he searches until he finds the serpent, deep in slumber, coiled intricately with his head in the center, filled with cunning wiles. The devil enters the serpent's mouth, taking possession of its crude senses, soon inspiring an intelligent act within. At first, he advances cautiously, as one who seeks entry but fears to interrupt. His words wind sidelong, varied and tortuous, as he curls many enticing coils before Eve's eyes to attract her attention. Often he bows his towering crest and sleek, glossy neck, pawning and licking the ground where she walks. His gentle, silent expression eventually draws Eve's gaze, marking his subtle play. After winning her favor with his flattering beauty, Satan draws near to Eve, addressing her with grand titles such as Sovereign Mistress, Empress, Queen of the Universe, and Goddess Humane. Though it's uncertain how this innocent creature of Eden could fully grasp these lofty terms, she appears to understand them well enough, and is likely impressed by the serpent's cleverness and finesse, qualities she had not noticed before. From this promising start, Satan continues to gloze the unsuspecting Eve, responding to her astonishment at his ability to speak by claiming that he gained this power by eating from a particular tree in the garden. Trusting him, Eve follows him to the tree, which she recognizes as the tree of knowledge. When she questions him, he cunningly replies by casting doubt on God's command. Indeed, hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat, yet Lords declared of all in earth or air? Hanford comments on this scene, noting that to overcome Eve's hesitation, Satan unleashes all his eloquence in praise of the tree's knowledge, much like an ancient orator rallying his case, appealing to skepticism against what seems an arbitrary and irrational command. Supported by Eve's physical hunger at midday, he ultimately succeeds in persuading her. Even Milton himself did not regard Satan's long speech as truly eloquent, surprisingly commenting that despite its length, Satan's guileful words found too easy entrance into Eve's heart. Once Eve eats, she is overwhelmed by various emotions, including fear that Adam might take another wife. Driven by this fear, she resolves to tempt him to share her error, becoming the instrument through which Satan's plan is fulfilled. She tempts Adam, with a lie born from Satan's influence, and Adam, portrayed by Milton as almost unbelievably magnanimous, chooses to eat the fruit rather than let Eve face the consequences alone. This act introduces lust into paradise, which had until then been utterly free of sin. So pristine was this innocence that Tilliard suggests Milton might have himself fallen into temptation within his own paradise, and then justify the act in a polemical defense. Hanford observes that Adam's fall is motivated by passion. Though his understanding allows him to see through the deceit better than Eve, and to anticipate its consequences, he soon succumbs to reasoning as flawed as hers and experiences the same brief pleasure in sin. This pleasure is quickly replaced by disillusionment and bitter regret. The fruits of the tree bring new knowledge, but it is a knowledge that ultimately serves as sophistry, leading only to self-contempt. The narrative continues with judgment delivered strictly in accordance with scriptural authority. Sin and her offspring, death, having gained entry into the world through Satan's success with Adam and Eve, build a bridge to ease the passage between earth and hell for both men and fiends. Easing their passage hence, for intercourse or transmigration, as their lot shall lead, so saying, with delight he snuffed the smell of mortal change on earth, with scent of living carcasses designed for death. After seducing Eve, the guilty serpent retreats quietly into the thicket. Lucifer's degradation is nearly complete, requiring only one final step. This step does not long delay, for upon returning to Pandemonium to announce his success, instead of the applause he expects, he is met only by the hissing of his followers, who have been transformed into snakes as punishment, an affliction they are implied to endure in memory of this event at least once a year. He wondered, but not long had leisure, wondering at himself no more. His visage drawn he felt to sharp and spare, His arms clung to his ribs, his legs entwining each other, till supplanted, down he fell, a monstrous serpent on his belly prone. Unlike Marlowe, Milton clearly addresses Satan's ultimate fate. The Lord God, who tempers justice with mercy in banishing Adam and Eve, also condemns the guilty serpent and foretells that the woman's seed will ultimately destroy Satan and his corrupted world. Even the actual serpent, used unwittingly as the vessel of temptation, since Satan had possessed its body while it slept, shares in this doom. Because thou hast done this, thou art accursed above all cattle, each beast of the field, upon thy belly grovelling thou shalt go, and dust shalt eat all the days of thy life. Not only is Satan to be utterly dissolved, but his kingdom is to be led captive through the air to a world restored to its pre-fall beauty. As Hanford observes, the promised resurrection is so joyful, and the erasure of Satan and the memory of sin so complete, that Adam and the reader are left uncertain whether to repent of their sin or rejoice instead. Byron's Lucifer in Cain, described by the poet himself as written, in my gay, metaphysical style, presents such a distinctly Byronic perverseness that his place among the many literary Satans is uncertain. Coleridge observed that while Byron's Lucifer has the vitality of a real personality, he sometimes falls into a grim mockery that seems beneath the dignity, if not the nature, of Satan. John Nicol considered him too Miltonic in speech to be entirely original. Byron, in the preface to the drama, claimed he tried to make Lucifer talk like a clergyman, whatever that might mean, and that he did his best to restrain him within the bounds of spiritual politeness. Whether this politeness is truly spiritual is debatable, but Byron's Lucifer, with his worldly cynicism about love's permanence and woman's beauty, is much closer to the polished veneer of a London drawing-room dandy than to the elemental grandeur found in Milton's Satan. As a character, this Lucifer is nearly, but not quite, convincing. He resembles the familiar Satan too much to be wholly a Byron invention, yet he carries enough of Byron's typical iconoclastic traits to prevent him from being the centuries-old figure entirely. These two sides don't quite merge into a single whole. Behind the transparent shell borrowed from tradition, Byron uses Lucifer to deliberately shock by scorning accepted orthodoxies. Nicol noted that in Cain, Byron wrestles with the confusions of a belief system he neither fully accepted nor rejected, and his half-serious, half-mocking tone somewhat undermines the tragic narrative of the first man's revolt against the harsh constraints of the present. Still, there is immense power in the unanswerable nature of this Lucifer, an admirable spirit in his bitterness toward questionable justice, and such craft and cunning as one would hardly expect when dealing with innocents newly come from Eden. He is as beautiful as a holy spirit and as wise as a serpent. He shifts arguments as skillfully as a modern lawyer, reasons with the unassailable logic of an Oxford debater, and employs the psychological tactics of a house-to-house canvasser. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, all this, he often sounds like Byron himself rather than Lucifer, slipping into sardonic humor that Cain could hardly appreciate. When Cain naively asks if there are serpents in the worlds they pass through, Lucifer replies, "Must no reptiles breathe, save the erect ones?" And when Cain expresses his deep love for order with words of surpassing beauty, Lucifer sneers, "Thou lovest it, because 'tis beautiful as was the apple in thy mother's eye, and when it ceases to be so, thy love will cease like any other appetite." Byron had long been regarded as satanic, and perhaps in this role he was simply dramatizing himself. The drama takes place just outside the cherubim-guarded Garden of Eden, set a generation after humanity's fall. The characters include Adam and Eve, their two sons Cain and Abel, and their sister wives Ada and Zillah. Cain is proud and rebellious, often lost in deep reflection about the justice of his parents' expulsion from Eden. He is especially troubled by his own ignorance and by his parents' failure to eat from the tree of life alongside the deceptive tree of knowledge. He questions the goodness of the power that placed the tree of knowledge within their reach only to forbid them from taking it. One morning, while the others leave to labor the cursed land in pain and exhaustion, Cain, moody and discontent, refuses to join them and asks to be left alone. Almost immediately, Lucifer appears. Though resembling an angel, His bright beauty carries a shadow of sorrow and a sinister quality that both repels and attracts. He quickly wins over Cain, who is half fearful, through cunning flattery and by praising Cain's rebellious thoughts. Lucifer offers to satisfy Cain's hunger for knowledge, on the condition that Cain bow down and worship him. Cain proudly refuses, saying he has not even bowed to the Lord his father worships. Hearing this, Lucifer is pleased and reminds Cain that if he has not worshipped God, he has already worshipped Lucifer. He renews his offer to reveal knowledge of the universe beyond the present and invites Cain to follow him. Before they depart, Oda, Cain's sister wife, enters. Initially mistaking Lucifer for an angel, she soon perceives his evil, serpent-like nature more clearly than Cain does and pleads with him not to follow. But Cain's desire to learn of realities beyond himself is too strong to resist. He reassures Oda that he will return within the hour, and then he and the spirit take flight from the earth into the upper ether. They pass worlds unknown, the earth shrinking behind them to a star-like dot, before vanishing completely. From constellation to constellation, they speed onward, cleaving the blue with mighty wings, only to find endless emptiness and nebulae. Cain grows more dissatisfied than ever and asks to see the kingdom of death. Lucifer then transports him there, a realm of uncreated night, inhabited by vast, magnificent phantoms, both mighty and beautiful. Lucifer explains to Cain that the phantoms he sees were once the inhabitants of earth before the Lord destroyed and repopulated it, as Cain himself knows. He tells Cain that all living beings must eventually come to this twilight realm, overcome with the realization that it is through him this shadowy world will be filled. Cain begs to stay. Lucifer denies the request, reminding him that he must return to earth and wait for death, which will grant him proper entry here. They journey back to earth, Cain stunned by the understanding that within this vast and infinite cosmos, he is insignificant and that all knowledge is ultimately meaningless. Meanwhile, Lucifer, pleased with his manipulation, completes his sinister plan. Through subtle questioning and suggestion, he awakens Cain's buried resentment toward his devoutly content brother, Abel. At Eden's gates once again, Cain is surprised to find that little more than an hour has passed, and that the morning sacrifices have not yet been made. Abel enters, having built 2 altars and carrying the firstborn of his flocks, urging Cain to offer his own sacrifice as well. After hesitation, Cain complies but utters a prayer filled with blasphemous doubt and distrust of the wrathful God of Eden. Abel's altar is accepted with a bright, pointed flame, while Cain's offering of fruits is scattered by a sudden whirlwind. Infuriated by what he perceives as a bloodthirsty God who favors slaughtered animals, Cain lashes out, attempting to destroy Abel's altar. Abel resists, but Cain, blinded by rage, seizes a burning brand from the altar and kills his brother. Zillah arrives to find Abel dead and bitterly reproaches Cain for failing to protect him from a wild beast, which she assumes is the killer. Others come and, seeing Cain with a bloodied brand, his stained hands and clothes, and his stunned state, realize that Cain is the murderer. His parents curse him and banish him forever. With sorrow, Cain and Oda gather their 2 children and leave, heading eastward. This is the basic outline of Cain's story. Turning now to examine this complex Lucifer. He calls himself the Master of Spirits, and suggests that his original rank was higher than that of the archangels. When Oda suggests he is neither cherub nor seraph, he replies that he is loftier than the archangels, though not blessed. He declares that if blessedness means slavery, he rejects it. This Lucifer is clearly too subtle and too bitter ever to admit fault when explaining the difference between what he once was and what he now is. He makes no mention of pride as the cause of his fall from his lofty position. In fact, he does not acknowledge his change in status as a fall at all. Instead, he skillfully spins the story in his favor with a speech designed to earn Cain's sympathy. He suggests that his departure from heaven was driven by his loving ambitions for mankind. When Cain asks who he once was, Lucifer replies, "One who aspired to be what made thee, and would not have made thee what thou art. I would have made ye gods, and even he who thrust ye forth, so thrust ye because ye should not eat the fruit of life, and become gods as we. Were those his words? They were as I have heard from those who heard them in thunder. Cain does not press further, nor does Lucifer explain the exact nature of his expulsion, if expulsion it was. The impression given is that Lucifer proudly withdrew rather than remain in heaven alongside a being he despised, so that I do divide his, and possess a kingdom which is not his. Though he follows certain traditional elements in his portrayal of Lucifer, Byron diverges sharply in his depiction of hell. He does not describe hell in the traditional sense at all. Rather, it is the realm of Lucifer, the kingdom of death. Reflecting the modern scientific age, his Lucifer discards old ideas about the location of this kingdom. It is no longer the center of the universe, but a tiny speck among countless, fair, revolving worlds. Lucifer claims dominion over the air, and, when Oda asks where he dwells, he answers, "Throughout all space, where should I dwell? Where are thy god or gods? There am I. All things are divided with me, life and death, and time, which is eternity, and heaven and earth, and that which is not heaven nor earth, but peopled with those who once peopled or shall people both. These are my realms." To demonstrate this, he leads Cain through boundless space, past worlds both created and uncreated, to such vast distances that the earth they left behind shrinks to nothingness. This Lucifer firmly denies any guilt in the fall of the first parents, a position supported by biblical ambiguity. Nowhere in the original biblical account is it explicitly stated that the serpent who tempted Eve was the devil or his agent. The identification of the serpent with the devil first appears in later texts such as the Book of Wisdom, and is assumed in Revelation, where this serpent is equated with the devil of subsequent tradition. Cain, confronted with the vastness and vague dreariness of this twilight realm, is overwhelmed and cries out as they near the cloudy gates of the realm of death. "'Tis a fearful light, no sun, no moon, no lights innumerable. The very blue of the empurpled night fades to a dreary twilight, yet I see huge dusky masses, but unlike the worlds we are approaching, which, surrounded by light, seemed full of life even when their atmosphere of light gave way, and showed them taking shapes unequal, of deep valleys and vast mountains, and some emitting sparks, and some displaying enormous liquid plains, and some surrounded with luminous belts, and floating moons which took, like them, the features of fair earth instead. All here seems dark and dreadful. Yet this world, fearful though it may be, is far from the torturous hell Dante so vividly depicts. Its inhabitants are those who once lived, but they are not shown as being punished for sins. There is no suffering here, nor happiness, but a vastness, a nebulous indefiniteness that cannot be fully grasped. It is a place of reptiles engendered out of the subsiding slime of a mighty universe, crushed into a scarcely shaped planet. Its inhabitants appear only dimly, as though seen through a dark mirror. Lucifer tells Cain, "Who shall?" Though these realms are thinly populated, Lucifer calls it a silent and expectant world, and explains to Cain, "Its present realm is thin to what it will be through thee and thine." Despite its sparse population, this kingdom of Lucifer is unique in quality. When Cain asks about the shades inhabiting this place, Lucifer replies, "Intelligent, good, great, and glorious things, as much superior unto all thy sire Adam could ever have been in Eden, as the 60,000 generations shall be. In its dull, damp degeneracy to thee and thy son, and how weak they are, judge by thy own flesh." Lucifer's own bright beauty is well acknowledged. Cain, upon seeing him approach, remarks, "Why should I quail from him who now approaches? Yet he seems mightier far than they, the angels, nor less beauteous, and yet not all as beautiful as he hath been, and might be. Sorrow seems half of his immortality." And Oda, though perceiving his serpent-like nature, says, "Tempt me not with beauty, thou art fairer than was the serpent." Persuaded against her will to heed temptation, she cried out with the rising anguish of a bird entranced by the dreadful fascination of a serpent, "I cannot abhor him, I look upon him with a pleasing fear, and yet I do not flee. In his eye there is a binding attraction which fixes my fluttering gaze upon him. My heart beats swiftly. He awes me, and yet draws me near, nearer and nearer. Cain, Cain, save me from him. Calmed by Cain's reassurance and his clear sympathy for this being, she feels once more the charm and profound sorrow of the wounded beauty she calls fairer and more powerful than the angels. In words worthy of his beauty, she expresses her feelings for him. Thou seemest like an ethereal night, where long white clouds streak the deep purple, and countless stars, the marvelous mysterious vault with lights that appear as if they might be suns, so beautiful, innumerable and tender, not dazzling, yet drawing us to them. They fill my eyes with tears, and so dost thou. Yet even Lucifer's radiant beauty is less perilous than his dreadful subtlety. He quickly aligns himself with the half-fearful, half-fascinated Cain through the cunning flattery of his opening words. Referring to Cain's bitter thoughts that had summoned him, he says, "They are thoughts worthy of all worthy thought. It is your immortal part that speaks within you. And hadst thou not been made by thy own soul fit for such company, I would not now stand before thee as I do." Having secured a hearing with this speech, he presses his advantage to build complete trust. Spirits and men, at least we sympathize, and shared suffering makes our countless pangs more bearable, through the boundless sympathy of all with all. Now fully convinced, Cain replies, "Never until now have I met aught to sympathize with me. 'Tis well, I would rather consort with spirits." Lucifer's subtlety is made all the more dangerous by his nearly irrefutable logic. When Oda cautions Cain not to judge Lucifer a god merely because he speaks like one, since the serpent who tempted the first parents also spoke like a god yet lied, Lucifer responds, "Thou errest, Oda. Was not the tree of knowledge, Oda, Lucifer, to our eternal sorrow? And yet that grief is knowledge, so he lied not, and if he did betray you, 'twas with truth, and truth in its own essence cannot be but good." When Oda, questioning him about his identity, innocently remarks that she has heard it said the seraphs love most, and the cherubim know most, so this must be a cherub since he loves not, Lucifer replies with a cold logic that would have confounded far more experienced disputants than these. If higher knowledge quenches love, what then must he be who cannot love when known? Since the all-knowing cherubim love least, the seraphs' love can only be ignorance. Nowhere, however, is Lucifer's clever tongue and sly mind more apparent than in the poisonous subtlety with which he persistently tries to highlight the barely felt dislike Cain harbors for his brother Abel. He asks Cain if his brother does not sit near his heart. Cain replies with silence, and Lucifer continues, "Why should he not? Thy father loves him well, so does thy God." In this context, a rare moment of humor occurs, perhaps intentional or not. Lucifer, trying to convince Oda of his truthfulness, says to her, "If I were not that which I have said, could I stand here? His angels are within your vision." To this, Oda responds, "So were they when the fair serpent spoke with our mother first." Lucifer then turns to Cain, the only other male present, seeking support against this illogical woman who still threatens to defeat him in logic, exchanging brief remarks that reveal Cain's resentment. Cain protests that Abel is the second-born of flesh and their mother's favorite. Lucifer mocks this, saying Abel should keep her favor since the serpent was the first to win it. Cain questions if he should love what all love, including his father and the indulgent Lord Jehovah, who smiles upon Abel's sacrifices. Cain admits he has never seen this smile, though he has glimpsed the angels, who love his brother and accept his offerings. The polished facade of Lucifer's argument suddenly weakens when Cain laments that infinity and immortality can fall out, jarring and turning space to misery. Cain accuses, "One of you makes evil, which?" Lucifer quickly turns the accusation back, "Thou, for if thou canst do man good, why dost thou not?" Lucifer offers no honest or logical response, instead retreating like a guilty schoolboy with the excuse, "And why not he who made thee? I made ye not, ye are his creatures, and not mine." Unlike even Milton's Lucifer, this Lucifer displays a rare proud independence of spirit and passionate sincerity, expressed repeatedly in his almost hysterical denunciations of God. Souls who dare challenge their immortality, souls who dare face the omnipotent tyrant and declare that his evil is not good. If he made us, as he claims, though I neither know nor believe it, then he cannot unmake us. We are immortal. Nay, he would have it so, only to torture us. Let him be. He is great, but in his greatness, no happier than we are in our struggle. Goodness would never create evil, and what else has he made? Let him sit upon his vast and solitary throne, creating worlds to ease the burden of eternity and his immense, unshared solitude. Let him pile orb upon orb. He is alone, an indefinite, indissoluble tyrant. If only he could crush himself, that would be the greatest gift he could grant. But let him reign on, and multiply his misery. I scorn all who bow to him, who made things only to serve his sullen, solitary eternity. I share nothing with him, nor would I. I would be anything but a sharer or servant of his power. I dwell apart, higher than you are slaves, and higher still than them or you would be, if they did not choose an independence of torture over the smooth agonies of flattery, in hymns, offerings, and self-serving prayers, to what is omnipotent, not from love, but from terror and selfish hope. In this, as in Marlowe's drama, there is no end to the power of evil or revolt. Instead, there is the promise of unending conflict, foreshadowed in this final, magnificent outburst of defiance, one that surpasses even the splendid defiance of Milton's Lucifer. Thou speakst proudly, but though proud, thou hast a superior, not by heaven, which he holds, nor by the abyss, nor the immensity of worlds and life, which I share with him. No, I have a victor, true, but no superior, all pay homage to him, except me. The biblical figure of Satan was developed gradually, and somewhat unconsciously, by the Hebrews to address a pressing need, to explain the existence of evil in a world believed to be governed by a divinely good and omnipotent being. Initially, Satan was neither fully understood nor clearly defined. At times, the same event was attributed both to him and to Yahweh. However, contact with foreign tribes during and following the long exile accelerated the solidification of Satan's concept. He became an essential counterpart to a personalized omnipotence, whose thoughts were seen as beyond human comprehension but still exerted coercive power over them. This external influence is reflected in one of Satan's common names, the devil, which comes from the Greek word diabolos. Another familiar name, Lucifer, meaning the morning star, likely originated from a reference in Isaiah. Early Christian fathers interpreted this as a veiled allusion to the fall of the rebellious angel from heaven. Yet, until well into the medieval period, it was rare for the devil to be called Lucifer. Over time, the name Lucifer became nearly synonymous with Satan, often with a distinction that Lucifer referred to the angel's original glorious form, while Satan denoted the fallen devil. It was universally accepted that Lucifer earned his name due to his extraordinary beauty. Gradually, Satan in later literature emerged as a clearly personalized figure, possibly first mentioned as such in Zechariah, complete with assigned duties, a fully understood history of past transgressions, and a foretold punishment. He was believed to be one of the highest created heavenly spirits, and his initial beauty, likened to the morning star, was widely accepted by subsequent writers. Medieval popular writers such as Caesarius of Heisterbach, Thomas Cantempratensis, and Jacobus de Voragine, in works like the Golden Legend, are filled with vivid depictions of the evil one and his dark minions, whom they claim to have encountered on numerous occasions. These demons sometimes appeared with the faces of veiled women or as children with faces of iron. The devil himself was often said to take the form of a large black tomcat, a moor, or a dog, using such disguises to attend witches' gatherings. He was also a frequent, disruptive presence in convents, sometimes robbing monks of their sanity or paradoxically granting them extraordinary preaching abilities. Medieval tales abounded with gruesome descriptions of the devil tormenting souls after death, clawing at their naked bodies, a terrifying image vividly recounted by Caesarius of Heisterbach and others. The Reformation offered only limited relief from the harsh medieval beliefs. Persecution continued against those unfortunate souls thought to be under Satan's special influence, as Satan remained a vivid and real figure to devout believers. Luther himself warned his followers that they were always sitting in the midst of devils, who were closer to a Christian than even his own clothing or skin. On one occasion, Luther famously threw his inkstand at the devil, and on another, he claimed to have been awakened by the sound of the devil's footsteps above his head. When recounting this, Luther remarked that though he heard someone walking overhead, knowing it was the devil allowed him to fall peacefully back asleep. In Marlowe's work, Mephistophilis is so terrifying on first appearance that Faustus cannot bear the sight and asks him to take the form of a friar for his next visit. Among the writers studied, only Milton artistically explores the fallen archangel's changed beauty. Other authors tend to assume that the transition from magnificent splendor to repulsive ugliness happened instantly with the fall. Milton's Lucifer, however, does not undergo an immediate change. Instead, his beauty fades gradually, a loss that deeply pains his beauty-loving nature. According to one interpretation, this sorrow serves as a form of punishment for the defiant archangel. One of the most poignant moments in Paradise Lost is when Lucifer, unaware of his fading glory, is informed of it by Eden's guardian angels. Yet, his transformation into the repulsive serpent does not fully complete until after he tempts man, with a gradual loss of beauty mirroring his moral and spiritual decline. Byron's portrayal of Lucifer emphasizes his beauty so strongly that Cain esteems him above the angels, and Oda even mistakes him for a god because of it. According to biblical tradition, Satan lost his exalted position through sin, the sin being pride. Marlowe's Mephistophilis acknowledges that Lucifer was cast out of heaven by aspiring pride and insolence. Milton takes this further by identifying the exact cause. When it is decreed that all must worship the Son as second only to the Father, Lucifer cannot accept being arbitrarily displaced. In response, he withdraws his followers to prepare for armed rebellion against the newcomer. Byron surpasses Milton by moving beyond common explanations for the rebellion. Unlike many medieval writers who attributed it to envy of man, or Milton who saw envy of the sun as the cause, Byron's Lucifer does not mention pride as a reason for his fall. Instead, he claims his fall stemmed from a disagreement with God over the creation of man. According to this Lucifer, there was no envy of man, but rather a loving ambition for him. He wished to make humans like gods, and even those who cast them out would become gods themselves. This is the first time Lucifer is clearly portrayed on the side deserving of man's sympathy and support. By the 19th century, there was a recognized need not only to explain the presence of evil, but also to justify God's ways to humanity. The biblical account of the fall, as described in Revelation, was widely accepted by later writers. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels. And they prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Marlowe omits details about how the fall occurred. Milton, however, provides a clear and specific narrative. When Michael fails to defeat the rebellious hosts, the Messiah arrives and with mighty thunder drives them from heaven. Byron adds little to this expulsion story, giving the impression that Lucifer was not forcibly thrown out, but withdrew proudly rather than share the throne with a being he deeply despised. According to various biblical passages, Satan became ruler of a kingdom after his fall, though this kingdom's location is described differently, as on earth, in hell, or in the air or firmament. Writers differ widely on where Satan's kingdom is located, but all agree it exists somewhere. Marlowe focuses more on defining the nature of hell than its physical location. He emphasizes the internal reality of hell, which lends his Mephistophilis a strangely human appeal. Mephistophilis himself says, "Hell hath no limits, nor is circumscribed in one self-place, for where we are is hell, and where hell is, there must we ever be." When pressed for a geographic location, he places this kingdom within the bowels of these elements. Milton also embraces the idea of an inward hell of unending remorse, though he places less emphasis on it than Marlowe. However, he makes notable changes to the traditional geography of hell. In Milton's vision, hell is no longer located within the earth itself, which at the time of the fall has not yet been created. Instead, Milton divides infinite space into two realms: heaven above, known as the empyrean, and beneath it chaos, or uncreated matter. From this unformed matter, hell is formed, a vast domain of fire, lakes, and icy torment, positioned 9 days' journey away from heaven. Byron takes a very different approach regarding the location of Satan's kingdom. It is not even within the same universe. Earth shrinks to the size of a star and ultimately vanishes before Lucifer's kingdom is reached. This realm appears as a vast, nebulous world, closer in nature to the chaotic void of Milton's hell than to the traditional hell of earlier literature. Importantly, this kingdom is not described as a place of punishment. It overwhelms Cain with its vastness and obscurity, but there is no suggestion that souls there are undergoing penance for earthly sins. According to biblical accounts, those who dwell in this realm include those who fell with Lucifer, along with certain earth-born individuals who have grievously sinned. Those expelled from the church are also said to reside there, atoning for their errors. Matthew's writings, in particular, refer to Satan's kingdom as a realm inhabited by demons. Marlowe portrays suffering in hell as not merely physical torment, but the ceaseless mental anguish of recalling the face of God before all hope was lost. In Marlowe's depiction, the lost souls include not only those who fell with Lucifer, but also powerful rulers and potentates. The presence of snakes and adders in this hell echoes the inferno, as Faustus calls out to them in his dying moments. In Paradise Lost, Lucifer's followers in hell consist solely of the angelic host that fell with him, as mankind had only just been created. This fallen host, which includes mighty princes such as Belial and Beelzebub, endures both the inner torment of remorse and the external punishments of fire, brimstone, and ice. S. Humphrey Gertine offers an insightful comparison between Milton's hell and Dante's Inferno. He observes that Milton's modern traditional hell bears little resemblance to Dante's medieval, philosophical vision. According to Dante's scholastic theology, a person's free will can move in one of three directions. It may align with wrongdoing, representing the mental and spiritual state of the Inferno, where the deed itself creates the subjective environment of punishment. Alternatively, it may act in complete opposition to wrongdoing, which corresponds to the state of Paradiso, where the deed produces a subjective experience of happiness. Lastly, free will may recoil from wrongdoing upon recognizing its harmful effects on both self and society, representing the state of Purgatorio, where a character previously inclined towards sin strives to regain moral rectitude. Milton's depiction of hell focuses specifically on the time of the great archangel's fall and the fall of man, before humanity's own descent into sin and death. Milton's hell is presented as the final fate of Satan and the rebellious third of the angelic host who joined him in treason. It is portrayed as a place of indiscriminate punishment, marked by a somewhat coarse theological tone and even moments of relative gaiety. Occasionally, Milton seems to glimpse Dante's grand and solemn vision of the afterlife, but these moments are fleeting and do not significantly influence his understanding of punishment's true meaning. Both Milton and Dante agree that those in hell suffer from a persistent sense of injury, refusing to see their torment as the natural consequence of their own sins. Instead, they blame their suffering solely on the perceived tyranny and whim of the Supreme Being. Dante's Inferno is distinguished by the subjective nature of punishment, symbolized through its various circles and chasms, but this complexity is only lightly acknowledged in Paradise Lost. The sharp distinction Dante makes between the arch-traitor's crime and the lesser guilt of his followers finds no equivalent in Milton's work. In Paradise Lost, all the rebel angels endure torment equally, or if any differentiation exists, it favors Satan himself. Dante situates the arch-traitor at the very bottom of Inferno, trapped in a cone of ice beneath the weight of a hemisphere, while his followers are relegated to the vestibule, or anti-hell, a neutral zone where neither pain nor happiness can be felt. Milton portrays Satan as a proud archangelic knight, free both in body and will. He indulges his passion for adventure and errantry without restraint. Satan is capable of passing through the gates of hell or descending through the starry universe. He can gaze upon the brilliant light of the empyrean and hold conversations with cherubim and seraphim. Even if his glory as an archangel is diminished, he remains the idol of his solitary tribe, the beloved yet feared leader of hell's forces. His followers, however, are victims of his excessive ambition and endure a shared punishment of alternating fire and ice. Their torment is often broken by songs of heroic deeds, theological debates, or explorations through the hills and valleys of the infernal realms. In essence, Milton's Satan fully embraces his conviction that to reign is worth ambition, though in hell, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. What his followers might think of this belief is left to the reader's imagination. The ideas of subjective punishments and fair gradations of torment seem not to have captured the imagination of the austere, puritanical Milton. It was the keen philosophical insight of the Italian poet who interpreted the meaning behind the place where the worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched, and did so with remarkable skill and power. On this matter of hell, Milton's epic does not compare to Dante's intricate Inferno. Byron introduces a surprising element to the image of Lucifer's subjects by including not only those who have lived on earth, but also those who have yet to be born. However, since this kingdom shown to Cain is not a realm of expiation for earthly sins, the presence of the unborn there is less startling than it first seems. Through Lucifer, we learn that those inhabiting this realm who once lived on earth are described as intelligent, good, great, and glorious things, a stark contrast to the drunken and lustful creatures of Dante's Inferno. The Bible accuses Satan of a vast range of crimes, from inciting wrongdoing to petty theft, even going as far as tempting Christ himself. The sheer variety and extent of these accusations help explain why Milton and Byron sought to restore some of Satan's former grandeur, recalling his status as the chief adversary of God and humanity. Satan's aim is to undo God's work. He desires to lead people away from God and constantly tries to persuade them to sin. He is sometimes linked to causing financial loss and physical suffering. With access to human hearts, Satan deceives people and gains their conscious and unconscious obedience. He seduces Adam and Eve, causes demonic possession, steals the word from the hearts of those who are ignorant or inattentive, incites Judas, contributes to Peter's fall, and even tempts Christ. Under his influence, Ananias and Sapphira lie to the Holy Spirit. He obstructs Paul's ministry, sending a messenger to afflict him, and lays traps to harm the children of God, seducing them through subtlety. Christ himself branded Satan a liar and murderer. Marlowe narrows his depiction of Satan's work to the temptation of Doctor Faustus. Every tactic, from simple deceit to outright force, is used to claim Faustus's soul. The characters involved range from the honest Mephistophilis to the treacherous evil angel, with Mephistophilis, Lucifer, and the evil angel all focusing on Faustus simultaneously. It is easy to sympathize with Faustus's despair. Why, then, belike we must sin, and so consequently die? Milton's Satan chooses to tempt mankind alone. He first invades Eve's mind through an evil dream, and later approaches her openly as a serpent. He does not hesitate to lie or flatter, and directly causes a long list of sins to enter the newly formed paradise. According to Hanford's summary of Milton's Christian doctrine, these sins encompass a violation of the entire law, including unbelief, ingratitude, disobedience, gluttony, excessive devotion of a husband to his wife, a wife's lack of proper respect for her husband, parricide, theft, violation of others' rights, sacrilege, deceit, fraud, pride, and arrogance. The Lucifer depicted in the story of Cain stands out as perhaps the most dangerous of all satanic figures examined. He approaches his target with unmatched tact, gaining trust through a display of sympathy for mankind's suffering. This Lucifer, described as one whom sorrow hath made immortal, appears so entirely appealing and admirable that the sudden uncovering of his diabolical plan to ensnare Cain comes as a sharp shock. His subtlety is remarkable, and it is only through his persistent efforts to deepen Cain's hatred for Abel that his satanic nature becomes clear. Here, the fall of man occurs through a single, repeated evil suggestion. The Bible offers conflicting information about the ultimate fate of Satan's power. Some texts describe Satan leading men astray by deceit and false prophecy in a final apostasy, while others predict his release from a long icy imprisonment after 1,000 years. Yet, other scriptures promise that he will remain forever confined in the lake of everlasting fire prepared for him. Marlowe, whose focus is more on Faustus than on Satan himself, hints at hell's duration only indirectly. Regardless of Marlowe's own views, it is clear that Faustus believes hell to be eternal. Milton provides a more definitive prophecy concerning Satan's ultimate fate. According to Michael's words to Adam, Satan is destined to be completely destroyed, and the very memory of sin erased. This joyous outcome is to be accomplished through Christ's coming, who atones for humanity's sins. Notably, Milton is the only writer among those studied who emphasizes this final resolution to satanic power. Byron offers a surprising take on Satan's future and his dominion. His Lucifer neither expects nor desires reconciliation between the forces of good and evil. Instead, he claims that if balance is ever restored, it must come from humanity itself. This potential comes from the divine gift of reason bestowed on man. For Lucifer, however, the struggle will continue eternally against what he calls the indefinite and indissoluble tyrant. His vow is to battle endlessly through all realms, heaven, Hades, space, and countless universes, until the great conflict ends, if it ever does. He questions what could ever extinguish their immortality or mutual, irrevocable hatred. With these boldly defiant words, this study concludes.